Okay, so the main issue I want to discuss in this video is that of sexual harassment and why I believe it is an issue. Before I do that, you'll excuse me if I just briefly talk about the late Hugh Hefner. It's been in the news that the founder of Playboy, Hugh Hefner, has died at 91. And I guess you could say it's not entirely unrelated to the subject. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat with that, no, I'm not saying that Hugh Hefner harassed women, okay? So before you jump and think I'm making that conclusion, I'm not. Rather, I'm making the point that Hugh Hefner was a polarizing figure, and to his critics, that was the case. Now, I don't know enough about the man personally to have made a specific video on him, but few things to observe. He was 91. Um, he built a business empire coming from relatively humble origins. And in itself, it's difficult not to respect someone who has a vision and then builds it up over a lifetime. So he accomplished his life dream. Now, the tributes, a lot of them have been worn. And I'm just going to read a few out here. Nancy Sinatra, who posed for Playboy in 1995, called him one of the nicest men she had ever known. Jenny McCarthy, a former Playmate of the Year, said, "R.I.P. Hef. Thank you for being a revolutionary and changing so many people's lives, especially mine. I hope I made you proud." Gloria Steinem, who went undercover as a Playboy Club bunny, wrote, "I think Hefner himself wants to go down in history as a person of sophistication and glamour, but the last person I would want to go down in history is Hugh Hefner." On the eve of his 1989 wedding, he said, I've had a bachelor party for 30 years. Why do I need to have one now?" Baywatch actor and Playboy model Donna D'Errico said, "Hugh Hefner put me in Playboy and ignited my career. I'm forever indebted, Hef. You will forever live on as an icon of epic proportions." And the Eye has also had a few quotes from feminists who had a very harsh assessments of Hugh Hefner. But I think it's quite telling that that is a left wing newspaper. Clearly, they're trying their best to get critical views, and they're actually struggling to find them. And I have quoted a few feminist comments. Feminists hated Hugh Hefner because they saw him as a sleazy manipulator who used women's bodies as, for his business. But others would say he revolutionized the sex industry in the 60s, the sexual revolution, and he was actually a great believer in liberation of women in the sense that he um, promoted the idea that they are sovereigns of their own bodies. He was also, as I understand it, a great proponent of gay rights and of freedom of expression. So, very famous person, very divisive viewpoints. In the limited information I do know about him, I've never bought Playboy, I've never been quite into that, but I think that the critics would do well to actually consider the views of the playmates themselves. And it doesn't escape my notice that feminists are always quick to demonize men like Hugh Hefner whilst patronizing the women who actually praise him. So they don't actually respect the self determination of those women. You know, there's no evidence that Hefner ever forced anyone to work at his mansion. There's no evidence he ever exploited women against their will or anything like that. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind. Anyway, that's that. I didn't intend to make this whole video about that, but I thought it was important to mention because obviously, very famous person, and people can have their own views on him. Like I say, I tend to veer more towards. I'm not going to call him a great sexual liberator because I don't know enough about him to say that, but I don't think he deserves the vilification he gets from feminists, put it that way. But on the subject of sexual harassment, and this is totally unrelated to what I've just said. I don't want people to think I'm lumping the two together. That's not intentional. The fact that they're in the same video. There's a report in today's Metro. A worrying 72% of 18 to 24-year-olds have witnessed sexual harassment in pubs and clubs, and 79% of young women see it as part and parcel of nights out, a poll shows. Some 63% of women and 26% of men in the age group have been targeted themselves, reveals a survey commissioned by Drink Aware. The charity has launched a campaign urging revelers to intervene by asking, "Are you okay?" if they see someone they believe is either being verbally or physically harassed. Okay, I've had some personal experience of this. I haven't been sexually harassed as such, but I've had personal experiences so far as I have seen women being harassed. And I want to give my thoughts on this. Um, it goes without saying, I'm not a fan of the way that the feminist movement goes about some of its campaigns. I'm not a fan of male shaming. I'm not a fan of this intrinsic aspect of modern feminism that all men are bastards. And, individual feminists may not believe that, but the movement is unquestionably vociferously anti male, despite what it says. That's just been the track record of modern Western feminism. Um, it hasn't got a single positive thing to say about men or masculinity. That's a fact. But that doesn't change the fact that sexual harassment is also a real problem. So when feminists talk about this, they're not entirely wrong. And this is someone who is a critic of feminism saying, on this issue, they're not entirely wrong. Sexual harassment is a problem. I've personally seen it. I have seen female friends get unwanted male attention. Um, and I haven't, dashed in there like a knight in shining armor, because these aren't little girls that, can't look after themselves. But I have at some points intervened, and there's never been any big trouble. But I do think that we have to concede as guys that there are some men out there who won't take no for an answer. And what I think one problem that the feminist movement has made has been giving the impression that they believe that all foreplay is harassment. It's not. Because if we're going to rule all of that out, then men are never going to approach women. And that's obviously going to create problems. However, I do think that there is a laddish culture out there that's very often dismissed as banter, that's very often dismissed as trivial, that actually is totally inappropriate and, in my view, shouldn't be condoned. You get blokes who basically they think they could go up to women and then call them love and sweetheart and so on, and these are total strangers. And they talk to them in a way that is frankly quite condescending. And you don't have to be a beta male or a feminist or anything like that to observe this. If someone is uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable, and you can't dictate to them, oh, you have to feel good about the way I am talking to you. I wouldn't talk to any stranger like that. Even if I was attracted to her, it's not, there's ways to go about things. There's ways to go about things. Now, of course, there are certain women who will exaggerate situations, or they will, in some cases, play and manipulate what has actually happened. There have been examples of innocent men falsely accused. We all know that. But I don't think we can say that there is not a problem. There are certain men who think that they are entitled to female attention. And they think that they can ogle girls, especially when they're on a lads' night out and they're in a group. They think they can, um, talk about women in a very derogatory way, very vocally and very in a very brash sort of way, and they don't think it's a big deal. Um, I recall seeing the film Rogue Trader starring Ewan McGregor not long ago, and there's a scene in the film. It's about the insider trading of the Barings Bank, Nick Leeson, in the 1990s. I'm not sure how true this is, but in the film, shows Nick Leeson going to Singapore and along with some other bankers, they get drunk and basically they make very sexually suggestive comments to young women in a bar. Well, they end up getting arrested because Singapore has very strict laws on that, and they're shocked by it. They don't know, but that's a good example of the sort of thing I'm talking about. If you're a decent person, you should have some degree of self control. It's not about being a Puritan, it's not about not having a good time, but just have a certain level of decency where you're not making someone else uncomfortable. Okay? Um, I think we have to accept the fact there are some men out there who think that it is perfectly okay to talk about women in a certain way, in a very crude, highly sexualized way, that does make them uncomfortable. And you have to put yourself in a woman's shoes. I mean, take, for example, the wolf whistling thing. Now, I don't think that people should be arrested for wolf whistling, but by the same token, I don't think it's okay. Okay, people might say it's harmless, but and they might say, "Oh, stuck up cow, she should just take a compliment." I don't entirely agree with that because, in the end of the day, it's still unwanted attention. And some women may have the confidence to say, "Oh, well, they think I'm attractive. I should be happy about that." But you can't kind of frame it like, "Oh, I'm giving you a compliment. Stop whinging." If someone's uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable. Um, and I don't think people should do it. I don't think builders should be arrested for making wolf whistling, but at the same time, I don't think it's trivial. I don't think it's just whatever. Um, Put it this way: if it was your sister or your girlfriend or your wife or a female friend, would you be okay with it? No, I don't think so. Um, so a lot of this comes down to just common sense. Sexual harassment is a reality, and it's one of the areas I would concede feminists are not entirely wrong. And when they raise this issue, we shouldn't entirely dismiss it, or it's just feminists complaining about men again. Yes, there's huge problems within feminism, and yes, they often are guilty of basically just male shaming. Goodness knows I am critical of many aspects of modern Western feminism, but we can't say that every single thing they say is wrong, because it's not. And we can't say that the problem of sexual harassment doesn't exist. Having said that, there are certain women who don't exactly help matters. I remember the young woman, I think she was a lawyer, forget her name now, Charlotte Proudman, that was it. She made a huge issue about a male colleague who had complimented her, and she framed that, and feminists framed it as sexual harassment. No, all he had done was literally given her a compliment, and this wasn't a sleazy sexual thing. It was literally like, "Oh, you're good looking" or something like that. Now, maybe he shouldn't have done it, but she initiated the contact. If you recall the case, you'll know what I'm talking about. That is an example of a situation being totally blown out of proportion, and in the end, most of the criticism, including from women, landed on her doorstep because she had actually made a massive issue out of it, even though she was the one that made the initial contact. So I also think that that's where feminists are wrong to classify every single compliment that a man makes as harassment. I think a lot of this comes down to common sense. If a woman's uncomfortable, stop. Okay, read body language. If someone's uncomfortable, stop. But I would also say that feminists have to stop treating every single interaction, every time a man pays a compliment, as harassment, because it's clearly not. But there are certain things. Clearly, groping is wrong. It's criminal, and it should be. Um, and let's be honest, there was a time, let's say in the 60s and 70s, where there was a very, very macho sort of culture, which basically said that these things were acceptable and we should tolerate them. I mean, there was a series of popular seaside, so-called saucy seaside postcards, popular in the 50s and 60s, and some of them were just plain crude. I mean, they're very hard to justify by today's standards, and I don't think that's being politically correct. You know, they were just blatantly sexualizing, they really were objectifying women. And I'm not one to throw that around. I don't think sexuality is objectification, but those, if you know the what, I think they were Bamforth or something like that, they're called, but there were some of them were just, you can see why they're dated and you can see why they would be inappropriate to date, put it that way. Anyway, I'll leave it there. But I think a lot of this just comes down to common sense. If someone is clearly uncomfortable, stop. And I would say, as men, we need to stop sort of dismissing everything as banter. If a woman's uncomfortable, it's not banter, it's bullying, right? And there's no excuse for it. It's not good enough saying, "Oh well, she should lighten up, she should take a compliment." If she's uncomfortable, okay, maybe it makes you feel awkward, and that's that. Maybe it wasn't your intention, but you can't say, "Oh, lighten up, bitch," have a apologize for the language, but I'm just trying to make the point that that is the attitude that some men have, and it's wrong. Okay, Let me know your thoughts, and thanks for watching. And just a final disclaimer here, the bit I was talking about regarding Hugh Hefner at the beginning, I don't want people to hear that and think, oh, Nathan's saying Hugh Hefner was blah, blah, blah. I'm not. I was just mentioning it because it was in the news and I didn't want to make an entirely separate video on that. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts.